Так, ну что, друзья, у нас 16:00. Я думаю, поскольку у нас такие сессии идут достаточно сильно подобранным таймингом, то мы будем начинать. Все, кто уже присутствует сейчас в зале, я надеюсь, к нам сейчас постепенно присоединится еще несколько человек, но для всех, кто присутствует, я хотел бы поприветствовать вас, спасибо, что вы собрались, и поприветствовать нашего гостя, первого из спикеров этой сессии, Мэрилин Хэмильтон. Мэрилин на самом деле является одним из, на мой взгляд, ведущих в мире специалистов по теме городов. У нее есть свой подход к развитию городов, который называется «Интегральные города». Она консультирует проекты городского развития по всему миру, активно работает и с Россией, и поддерживает целый ряд проектов здесь. И на самом деле Мэрилин, на мой взгляд, это как раз представитель такого очень системного и долгосрочного мышления о будущем городов, которое позволяет ей предлагать и реализовывать очень стратегические решения в сфере развития, комплексного развития городской среды, сообществ и так далее. Я думаю, вот я уже предварительный материал от Мэрилин посмотрел, я рассчитываю, что у нас сегодня будет очень интересный, вдохновляющий доклад, который о многом заставит задуматься. И добро пожаловать. И, коллеги, напоминаю, что сразу после доклада, после его завершения, мы будем с вами переходить в режим групповой работы и анализировать все то и все те идеи, которые вы услышите сейчас в рамках доклада. Спасибо большое, и мы начинаем. Mэрилин, welcome. We can start. I have just introduced you in Russian.
Thank you, Pavel. Thank you very much, and I'm so happy to be here, quite delighted. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to just start off so that people can see who I am, because once I share my screen, you don't get to see me. So I am very happy for the welcome that Pavel has just given me. Delighted to be with you in Russia, at least online, and I'm missing my usual visit every year. So this will be my visit to you, and I'm going to be joined by Gaia herself. So let me share my screen. So I am Mэрилin Hэмильтон, as Pavel has already introduced, and I'm the founder of Integral City Meshworks. I'm also the author of the Integral City book series. I have also published in Spanish recently a small book on accelerating city change in a VUCA world, and yes, even in Russian. My first book was published in Russian, and I'm very happy that this has opened up pathways for me to stay connected to Russia. So I am going to share a conversation today because I've been asked to talk about the future of cities in 100 years. And I thought that the person I should connect with this is Gaia herself. So she has offered to mentor me about how her Earth cities can evolve maturity and well-being. I opened my third book with these words: how can we design a city for the well-being of our granddaughters and future generations in a way that adds value to all life on Earth? That is the question that jet propels me from my calm eco-village in Scotland, where I live, to the farthest reaches of the universe, and has made me take notice how the discoveries of space pioneers such as Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, the Voyager 1 and 2 space exploration program designers, Elizabeth Sahtouris, evolution biologist, and Elon Musk, inventor, how they contribute to designing conditions for optimal human hives. On this journey, I have asked related questions that might reveal the mysteries of living well in cities. How do we wake up the human hive as a whole? Why should I care for her resilient souls? understand the context of people's goals, develop organizational capacity for critical roles, amplify sustaining energy flows, or heal the traumatic impact of warring blows. In 2021, I would be overwhelmed in answering these questions when I contemplate the future of our cities with the dire scenarios described by Dwayne Elgin in Choosing Earth. He proposes that our current circumstances that I characterize as the big challenges of the city, energy, water, climate, food, biogenetic, psychocultural, can be situated at the trailhead of three possible pathways into the future. He projects the likely outcome of each scenario. The first one is status quo, where we crash and collapse. It's because we do nothing and we burn up. The second is autocratic, an authoritarian governance with artificial intelligence leads to large system change under autocratic control, and humans will lose personal freedoms. And the third is self-organizing, what he calls the Great Transition. After an extended period of struggle, local large area system change will occur with free personal agency that opens a whole new era of aliveness and unity. These three pathways are all in existence now in different cities in different parts of the world. As beginning conditions, how will they determine local and global futures? I wonder what will be the distribution of the three pathways. How are they permeable to one another? Does their coexistence mean never-ending conflict and tension? And what will be the catalysts that enable conflict and competition to move to cooperation and collaboration? 100 years from now will be 2121. Elgin chooses to tell the story of the Great Transition in decades that I will mark with generational stages, as the Great Turning does. My baseline, by the way, is that in 2021, this year, Cole, my great-grandchild, is 7. His parents, my grandchildren, are in their 30s. His grandparents, my children, are in their 60s. And I myself, I'm in my 70s, in the class of old age on the way to death. So in my family, I already have 4 generations to recognize what will be impacted and who will be impacted by the future as it unfolds. I characterize the 100 years ahead of us in these 4 stages that align with Elgin's stages. The first one I call waking. So that's 2020 to 2039. He calls it recognizing the crisis, the great unraveling, collapsing civilization, the great fall. So by the time this is completed, this stage, Cole, my grandson, will be 20. The next stage, growing from 2040 to 2059, Elgin describes as into the fire of initiation, the great sorrow, a conscious species, civilization, the great awakening. At this stage, Cole, my great-grandchild, will be 20 plus. We go next into the cleansing stage, 2060 to 2089, preserving the future. Elgin calls this choosing Earth, an open future. And at this stage in the cleansing, Cole, my great-grandchild, will have his own great-grandchild. And finally, the 4th stage, holding from 2090 to 2119, I ask, which of the 3 pathways did we choose? This is beyond the stages that Elgin describes. But at that point, Cole will have his own great-great-grandchild. So from the 4 generations in my family that are alive today and projecting 4 generations into the future, we have in front of us what the indigenous peoples call 7th generation thinking. And indeed, all of my books are dedicated to the 7th generation from now. So I ask, with these oppressive scenarios, how I'm going to call up my radical optimism to have a conversation about cities with Gaia herself. And I have asked her, how do you imagine your cities in 100 years after we have finally recognized our life is inextricably part of you as our mother planet? And Gaia replies, I imagine Gaia as thriving and flourishing in a new golden age 100 years from now. I am a living example in the universe of planets, of a thriving, mature living system where human contribution reflects how magnificently creation has evolved all life, here including humans themselves. I imagine I have awareness of all my evolutionary life, and we have complete awareness of ourselves on a spiritual, bio, anthropocentric basis. I imagine I have emerged as thriving Gaia because of breaking through crises where younger generations of humans have imagined solutions that don't occur to their parents or older generations. I imagine somehow the younger generations find a way to join in my very energy and quantum field of my being. I imagine the role Integral City plays opens up because humans became able to be effective both locally and globally. Imagine the younger generations break through the initial pre-2021 fascination to contact each other, and they realized they have local and global or glocal power and can see that power is collective intelligence, CI. Imagine them as Gen CI, Generation Collective Intelligence. CI enables cities to discover double sustainability loops, like the bees have discovered, where they sustain the hive and pollinate the ecoregion. They implement the master code of care to care for self, others, places, and planet. And with this expansion of their circles of care to planetary scale, it is natural for them to implement the visions of Vandana Shiva to reconnect with the soil and rejoin the city to its ecoregion. In overcoming your current nature deficit disorder, this CI generation amplifies the intelligences to make it happen. With this special development of collective intelligence, the CIs truly embrace the Integral City GPS, the global positioning system, and find direction in, with, and as the Integral City. They are adept at addressing the contexting intelligences, the ecological, the emergent, the integral, and the living. They balance the individual, inner and outer, intelligences with their new prowess of collective intelligence, cultural and social, so that the relationship between I and we is elegantly regenerative. And they design effective earth-centric strategies because they never tire of inquiry. They have learned how to meshwork self-organizing operating systems with structural operating systems. And altogether, they are proficient navigators of aliveness, using guidance from the 0-point Akashic field with advanced digital and beautiful analog guidance systems. Finally, the collective intelligent generation, attuned many times a day to the evolutionary impulse they know as their source. I imagine humans and human hives connect themselves in ecoregions around and in cities, bringing the relationship of integral cities and ecoregions with Gaia, me, to life. This brings the value of integral capacities, which you, Mэрilin, mapped out in map 1 of the whole, all quadrants, all levels city. You bring it to life through a series of generational cycles. In addition, we can see how the governance from the 4+1 voices of the city matured from mutual trust and respect to a governance system that guides cities through coalescing authority, power, and influence within cities and their ecoregions and across a whole planet of integral cities. I imagine this creates new conditions on Earth, so people develop in new ways. In 2021, we know the steps, stages, and lines of first-tier human development, but as second-tier blossoms, I imagine we learn to recalibrate and accelerate whole lineages, worldviews, cultures, and societies so they can become mutually sustainable by breaking political and economic stereotypes like Dwayne Elgin imagines in Choosing Earth and you have shown in map 4. I imagine modern and postmodern worldview stereotypes embedded in the developed world are counteracted by emerging city-states who break open those stereotypes and find natural self-organizing capacities of economy, environment, society, and culture. Imagine the children of Gen CI discover new answers and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren enable thriving cities on a thriving planet. I knew that in 2021, the roots for those new possibilities exist in our DNA and in the DNA of Gen CI. The spirit of the integral city sparks to a new level of aliveness with the spirit of younger generations, Gen CI, who grok and know it as an achievable reality. I knew they had the courage to not just dance with positives, but even walk into the middle of shadow and turn it inside out, like the Shambhala warriors they are. I imagined Gen CI could light up shadow in ways you think is blocked now. I imagine Gen CI and their whole lineage into the future could release shadow-blocked energy into new capacities that became available because the energy blocks dissolved. As Gaia, I imagine I have reflective organs. That is why I evolved the human species as my reflective organs. I could see that especially cities could become my reflective organs. I imagine Gaia's reflective organs, especially with Gen CI, could face the trauma and blockages in my planetary body. I wanted the human species as Gaia's reflective organs to work as reflective beings who can find and release that which is blocked and regenerate flow. I imagine reflection is the essence of the human species. I evolved you so you are conscious of your consciousness and able to think, do, relate, and co-create in ecosystems, able to follow matter, information, energy in their flexes and flows. Reflection follows feedback loops, so that as the systems become open, the organ is able to function more fully. You thought darkly in 2021 and were limited to ego and family and work scale. Many in Gen ZI saw what an impact it made to practice the karma yoga of the master code of care, caring for self, caring for others, caring for places, and caring for the planet. As this practice opened whole systems to flex and flow, I imagined Gen CI enabling blinders to be taken off, the veils of separation and fragmentation falling away, so we could see all integral cities as vibrant, alive systems. I imagined collective intelligence in integral city could holographically sense all of Gaia and at the same time light up all cities as a planet of integral cities, a veritable system. I evolved the integral city framework of 5 maps of the city as an organic process. It is a life system to design and build not just cities, but even space stations. I imagine we save ourselves from the threats we create as we co-evolve together. I imagine we really wake up, grow up, clean up, and whole up together. I imagine by the time I, Gaia, am thriving, we will have carried our capacities off Earth and discovered as we learn how and what happens on Gaia can happen off Gaia. I imagine that we are in a dance of inner and outer, individual and collective. I become a really thriving planet as humans become a really intelligent species with deep respect for anthropocentric life that brought us to this point, cities and all. And before I go on, I would just like to invite Alexandra to show a little animation of how this could unfold. Thank you. I'll go back to my screen. So this is Mэрilin speaking again. Gaia has spoken, and she's even shown us what she is imagining. I am energized and excited by the picture she paints of the future of cities in 100 years. But how do we evolve our cities from 2021 to 2121? Can we backcast to see how we could develop a strategy to realize what you imagine, Gaia? And Gaia starts to let me know. Yes, she says, that is my intention. I want to inspire you. I have some more wisdom to share. I am so grateful that James Lovelock recognized that as a planet, I, Gaia, am a living system. Not only am I alive, but I am the creator of all life on this planet. And I long to have a conversation with the most complex species I have evolved to date, you humans. I want to share with you some of the ideas and design frameworks I have evolved and how I am still in the process of evolving living evolutionary organs for my earth body. I have been busy creating forest organs for breathing, riparian organs for cleansing my wastes, heart organs from the savannas of Africa, circulatory organs from my rivers and lakes, and homeostasis organs from my great oceans. Now I long for a system of reflective organs that allow me to express my consciousness and intelligent culture. I have imagined these organs to be integral cities. When I imagine a planet of integral cities coming into existence, I will have a whole reflective organ system, like your map 4 shows, with organelles formed from organizations and cells from you individual humans. As a planet, I have been around for 4 billion years and have ancestors in the universe who have shared with me universal design patterns that I put to good use. For instance, cities are complex, adaptive, living human systems. As such, they are extensions of the living organisms that form you humans as individuals and collectives. Like all living systems, I have created cities demonstrate 3 behaviors. They survive, they adapt and connect with their environment, and they regenerate. So cities evolve, as we can see in the symbolic map 4. As living organisms, cities have the potential to develop through characteristics that I call archetypal and fractal. They are life cycle stages of most living systems: child, youth, adult, elder. Each of these stages has the potential to mature in ways that expand the worldviews and centers of care of your individual consciousness and cultures that contain them: ego, ethno, regional, global. And your languages describe these as I, you or we, it, and its. In turn, each of your worldviews can be related to a potential stage of maturity in engaging with the world that I name as waking, growing, cleansing, holing. Elizabeth Sahtouris, the evolution biologist, who has explored so much about the living system contained in cells and microbiology, wisely recognizes that humans are a very young species. By comparison to the honeybees that you study for insights through biomimicry, honeybees are 100 million years old. Your species is maybe 1 million years old if we stretch it. Elizabeth says, as a young species, you have been and are naturally conflicted and very competitive. This is very typical of the child and youth stages of most species. This youthful stage of your species, with all its conflicts and competition, is what has brought you to the circumstances that you experience in the world today. In your youth, you tend to see the world through an IU lens and challenge life with a competitive attitude. My first mentoring insight for you is that unless you can mature and outlive this stage to embrace a wider circle of care and become cooperative and collaborative, your species may not mature into the organs I, Gaia, so greatly desire. This is Mэрilin speaking again. Ooh, I'm a little stressed. Cities and the people who are in them are so different. How can we expect that what will work in one city will work in another? And Gaia responds, another wise human who has been extremely helpful in offering a coherent story about my evolution as a planet is Dr. Eddie. In 2003, he reframed the study of geography as a history of the universe and the world within an integral model and ecosystem science. He provided an evolutionary view within which others could examine both global environmental change and theories of human security. Eddie started with the Big Bang, or as Jude Currivan now calls it, the Big Breath, and revealed the evolutionary strata that culminate in human civilization, as in the diagram on the screen. Eddie grounded the study of global environmental change within three differentiated strata: the cosmosphere that spans the universe, that embodies my lineage as a planet, the biosphere that includes the living global environment, and the anthroposphere that embraces the human condition. He grouped the study of these into a spectrum of pure and applied ABC sciences: earth and planetary sciences, life sciences, and social sciences. The variations in each of these spheres helps to explain why cities are different from one another. Eddie's evolutionary ABC framework built on Ken Wilber's framing of holons and holarchies and effectively integrated the human condition within global environmental change, showing the three spheres as evolving one from the other and massively entangled at all scales and times, co-creating conditions where now it is evident that the anthroposphere is impacting both the biosphere and cosmospheres. For example, reducing biodiversity in the biosphere and changing the hydrological cycle in the cosmosphere. More recently, you, Mэрilin, integrated global environmental change issues within an evolutionary analysis of key literature to identify the strata that are critical to global well-being: the psychocultural social, the biogenetic ecological, food scarcity, climate, water, and energy. The diagram makes the direct linkages of energy threats to degradation of the lithosphere, water threats to degradation of the hydrosphere, climate threats to degradation of the atmosphere, food threats to degradation of the biosphere, and psychocultural social threats to degradation of the anthroposphere. The most evolved strata of this threat map is human civilization, which is now predominantly located in cities. I have become aware that the progressive entanglements and feedback loops between strata amplify the impacts of change on my whole planetary life as increasing complexity emerges. Thus, while the anthroposphere is the most complex, it not only impacts biosphere and cosmosphere, it too is impacted in turn by any changes originating in the bio and cosmospheres. So I now ask, as Mэрilin, Now I have a better idea of the relationship of the three great ecosystems that coexist on our planet and the patterns you have taught me to recognize in all places. But humans are unequally distributed around the world, and our cities are not all at the same level of development. How do we take that into consideration? Gaia replies, if you're going to evolve cells, organelles, organs, and organ systems, like I imagine as my reflective organ system, then it is a good idea to become aware of the conditions in which these living systems and subsystems are emerging. Let's get some big pictures of human population and demographics. Yes. So let's go a little slower and get some big pictures of human population and demographics. In purely biological terms, the success of humans can be measured by the rise in global population. The figure on the screen illustrates the exponential rate at which human population has grown and is anticipated to grow. In relating this population to growth in cities, we can date the first city with over 1 million inhabitants in 1800. By 1900, the world's 10 largest cities had populations in the range of 1.4 to 6.4 million. By 1950, the world's 10 largest cities had populations in the range of 4.8 to 12.4 million. By 2000, the world's 10 largest cities had populations in the range of 14 to 33 million. And by 2018, the world's 10 largest cities had populations from 18 to 37 million. Mark McCaffrey has been studying the scale of human systems in relation to climate change impact. He and colleagues created the Powers of 10 framework to use the 10 orders of magnitude between a single individual and everyone else on the planet as a framework. Their research showed that the sweet spot for climate change effectiveness was cities of 50,000 to 100,000. And by the way, this is an echo of the philosopher Aurobindo. In 1920s, in India, he suggested that 50,000 was the optimal size of a city. And I, Gaia, notice that this image and pattern is a fractal of your map too, of the integral city, where you have a hierarchy of the human systems within a city compared to McCaffrey's hierarchy of the systems outside the city. Mark and his colleagues noticed that the holarchy was a framework for scaling social transformation and could be expressed as an elegant Fibonacci image, as the image on the screen now. Perhaps one of the considerations we will have moving into the planet of integral cities is that you and I will imagine that we will have to do some work to right-size cities. Perhaps we can use the powers of 10 to start up eco-villages and target the size of new cities to be in the 50 to 100,000 population range. As you observe, people are not all the same in different cities or even within cities. So, as a corollary to the global population data, let's consider recent analysis of relational demographic profiles that show changes to worldviews and human capacities as the society matures in complexity. The image on the screen now shows the demographic growth profiles of 4 societies and their birth rates. So the first one is called pre-industrial. the second boom time, the third still rising, and the third the plateau. So you can see how the population grows across all of these scenarios. The clear trend that is shown is that as societies become more complex, measured in terms of wealth and or development, population fertility rates drop, lifespans lengthen, and total population size stabilizes or reduces, as you can see in the image to the farthest right. The outcomes of this pattern impact the four voices of the city. The demographics of cities result in different proportional impacts of the four voices. Citizens grow from least to greater empowerment. Civic managers trend from greatest to lesser power. Business innovators expand from less influence to more influence. And third sector or civil society discover an increasing capacity for coalescing and cohering all the other voices. Dr. Beck has proposed that in large-scale human systems, changes in complexity impact the political systems, economics, and well-being of societies. He makes the point that democracy as a governance system comes in many forms that align with the stages of maturity of a country. We would propose that cities are the key zones where each of these core society profiles emerge: the traditional, the pre-modern, the modern, the postmodern, or integral. The profiles seen in the images I will put on the screen now show that, first of all, nations that are more or less developed, which is what we're looking at now. And then when we look at income, less to more, we can effectively make visible the demographic shapes of the human hive at ever increasing stages of complexity. When I saw these images originally, as they are produced through the UN, I was absolutely taken with how they showed the shapes of what looked like human hives. And you can see that from all these profiles, the city nations with the most complex worldviews, most developed and most wealthy populations have proportionately fewer young people here, more elders, with a gradually stabilizing large population in midlife. Along with these evolving population profiles, life conditions are also shifting in cities around the world, producing a toxic mix of interconnected threats. The relationship of natural capital to human endeavor shows that human society in the industrial and pre-industrial world is almost bankrupt because it is now consuming my Earth's capital at a dangerous and unsustainable rate. As noted by Rees and Bockernagel, who published originally the Eco Footprint over 2 decades ago, living at this rate of consumption demands the equivalent of 3 to 4 planets. All of this demonstrates to me that I need to create an evolutionary solution, especially if I want you humans to build new cities. Just a minute, I ask. Before we talk about new cities, let's consider what we need to know to regenerate existing cities. And Gaia responds, okay, as we've seen, an evolutionary analysis of sustainability threats tells us that cities in the developing world face greater levels and more complex risks than cities in the developed world. These relate to both the internal ways of thinking, cultural beliefs, and visions, as well as the external behaviors and structures and systems of the city. That's why you suggest that developing quality of life in your human habitats requires both place caring and place making. When threats to city sustainability occur because of major natural disasters, restoring city capacities depends on strategies that must be evolutionarily appropriate to the level of complexity of the city, while keeping in mind its ecology, climate, and natural capital load. Many examples of disaster-based meltdowns dramatically illustrate the difference of regeneration in the world. For example, what happened in Sendai, Japan, with the terrible earthquake and tsunami, compared to the developing world, say on the island of Haiti, both of which are back in the news this week. Where the threats are less dramatic, for example, where deterioration has occurred over extended timeframes, the results may be no less drastic. For instance, in places where little social equity for workers' health and safety exists, toxic soups of physical and chemical deterioration endanger human survival. We know of polluted cities from Cold War Russia, the electronic and shipping recycling dumps in China and India, the maquiladoras in Mexico and Southern Asia, or even in the news again, Miami's recent apartment collapse. These cities are stuck in life conditions that have long ago threatened the health of the local biosphere and toxified the cosmosphere sufficiently to imperil the health of the anthroposphere. These same threats are now increasing regional and global deterioration, including global temperature increases, CO2 emissions, terrorism, corruption, refugee displacement, and restricted governance participation. In addition, such unsustainable city systems are clearly impacting any clear resolution of deforestation, democratization, non-fossil fuel adoption, and unemployment. Mэрilin speaking up again. If things are this precarious, how can we move beyond the threats and disasters of 2021 into some kind of positive future? And Gaia responds, well, luckily, I only design systems that learn and evolve, at least the ones I keep alive and in service to all life on planet Gaia. What you need is to shift from thinking in just intermittent projects to creating the conditions for schooling a whole planet of integral cities. From my Gaian perspective, the current situation needs systems thinking lenses, like the ones that Donella Meadows developed long ago to work out and identify the core leverage points to intervene in a system. From the ones you always want to work with, numbers and buffers and stock and flow structures, right down through information flows and rules, it is self-organization, goals, and especially paradigms and transcending paradigms that make a difference, make the most difference. Keeping the most effective leverage points in mind as the paradigms in use and how to transcend them, we discover in the Integral City Map 4 clues to understanding what are the driving values of the traditional, pre-modern, and postmodern integral paradigms, which we show on the screen now. And here we can see them interpreted in what I call the center of the universe. So traditional perspectives have a center of universe that's individual and family. Modern have the center universe, which is the kingdom or the immediate region and the nation state. Postmodern has a center of the universe as being the world economy and their social networks. And finally, an integral worldview allows us to have a center of the universe that is natural systems based and planetary based. And we can see related to each of these centers of the universe that the values themselves become more complex. So we move from traditional through integral, through survival, belonging, power, authority, performance, caring, and sharing, flex and flow, and finally, global well-being. In effect, this table shows us a relationship between the worldviews, which define who is at the center of the universe, the driving values, and the levels of complexity. The more advanced worldviews in the integral and postmodern act as the amplifiers to the capacity of the structures in cities in the developed world. On the other hand, the less complex worldviews, traditional and pre-modern, act as the limiters and filters that make structures in cities in the developing world much less resilient. So now we have input that can enable us to design a strategy for city development that aligns development with the systems embedded in the people, place, priorities, and planet who will be impacted. Not surprisingly, the roots of Gaia-centric designs for city well-being offer us a way of imagining the human hive that we can explore with the core principles of living systems, the 12 intelligences, 5 maps, and 4 voices. Essentially, these core principles of meshworking for city development include the following. Implement the master code. Create an agreement to work together for the formation team, including all 4 voices, based on the master code, so you can take care of self, others, places, and planet. Next, honor the spheres. Identify the change condition of the ABC spheres of the city container and map them with the global positioning system, the GPS, and the discovery profiles that we have developed based on that. I know the screen that I'm showing right now is very difficult to read, but it will be available with the notes we share. So once you have honored the spheres, the next step is to identify the change condition and to recognize the threats. Name and evolutionarily map the environmental threats in the system, overcoming the dissonance that provides the impetus or catalyst to change. Next, develop with purpose. Identify the purpose for development change. Create the change for changing the city from what to what. For example, traditional to modern, modern to postmodern, postmodern to integral. Imagine there is always a next natural step. Next, engage the stakeholders. Use the integral city maps, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, to find the agents for developmental change and engage all the 4 voices, as many stakeholders in the process as possible, to actively seek out diversity and make room for difference. Enable leadership to emerge to champion the development and address the threats at the appropriate levels of complexity. You also need to facilitate change processes. Amplify the resources available for development from all the 5 maps so others can see them, for example, in scenario planning. Also amplify the threats to development so others can see them. And integrally identify the resources needed to facilitate the change and invite and involve stakeholders to contribute to them. You need to design with integral methodologies. So use the Integral City Master Code the GPS, the intelligences and principles as checklists to determine right action. Then co-design integral methodologies for developmental change that self-organize passion, purpose, priorities, people, and planet. Oh, and by the way, expect it to be messy. The last two steps are learning from feedback loops, and as you create reflective feedback loops and integral vital signs monitors based on navigational intelligence, you will then have participants able to self-correct and develop operational structures that work. Making the feedback accessible to all by communication, publication, and display is very important. So use all of the media that are at your disposal. And also pay forward to other stakeholders, other cities, the integral learning for development, evolution, and adaptation. And always, always practice the master code. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of others, and together you can care for places, and all together you can care for our planet. Mэрilin speaks up again. Okay, I can see how this is not easy work for existing cities, but I think necessary for us to regenerate our relationship with you, Gaia. We have not been very respectful of you as our mother, and I can see that unless we take these steps, then you may decide that our cities are not a successful evolutionary experiment to become Gaia's reflective organs. But let's agree we will implement the approach to regenerating existing cities as you suggest. Now, can you give us some guidance for designing whole new cities? Gaia speaks up. Now, keeping in mind the challenges of bringing new lenses to the development of existing cities, how would we give you advice to design these neo-cities, new cities? This may become especially relevant in the next century if we set out to right-size our cities, as I suggested before. So we need to create the life conditions for creating new cities. We need to ask designers, investors, and developers some questions about their intentions. I'd like to know, how is a neo-city a logical next step for your development, as opposed to a village or a community? And if the neo-city assumes that it is possible to create a specialized habitat for humans with select interests, then how will neo-cities learn from the Masdar or Dubai effect, where construction and maintenance workers cannot afford to live there? How do neo-cities administer themselves democratically? How do the voices of non-elite workers and residents get equally heard with those of the elite? And finally, how do neo-cities risk developing caste systems or avoid developing caste systems internally or in comparison to external cities? Those are good questions, Gaia, I say. Thinking about neo-cities is undeniably exciting, especially when they seem to be really designed with the external requirements of the human hive in mind. But when viewing the ghost cities in China, which have been built and stand virtually empty without residents, I am curious if designers of neo-cities have considered any of the internal requirements of the human hive, such as considering that humans go through a developmental cycle. How have they built into the design of the city the fact that we will all start out at a basic developmental stage and must learn our way through a series of such stages? Do the designers recognize vertical development in themselves? Have they made allowances for continuous learning and the need for the city to change over time? What happens if assumptions about the city's environment, both internal and external, are drastically altered by events not under the designer's control? For example, natural disasters or man-made invasions.
Mэрилин, I apologize. Our translator Christina will have to go in just a couple of minutes. So, do you think it's possible for you to reach to a conclusion?
Yes.
How long, Dave?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Christina, is it possible for you to stay for 5 more minutes? Yeah, I think I can probably do a translation, but not a simultaneous one. So I'll have to go sequentially for the last maybe couple of slides that you have, Mэрилin.
Not a problem. Gaia understands. So the last questions I had about neo-cities was how do they defend themselves from external invaders such as envy, greed, power plays, and pandemics? And what is the right relationship of neo-cities to other neo-cities and traditional modern, postmodern cities? So if you can hear me, Pavel, will I hear your translation or you will just do it in Russian?
I just wanted to clarify if Christina has to leave right now, or are you still with us? Can you tell me when I have to switch to translation?
Sure. I've just, are you talking to Christine?
Or has she? She probably has already gone. All right, so I'll start translating. So just let me give me like maybe a few sentences so I can translate them in Russian, and I'll switch to Russian channel.
Okay. So I'm going to just jump ahead after the neo-cities because I think this will be too detailed to translate. So I'm going to jump forward to the conclusion, okay?
Коллеги, я попросил Мэрилин уже завершать, потому что, к сожалению, у нас синхронный переводчик вынужден был покинуть, и поэтому я буду переводить уже завершающий слайд по просьбе моих коллег. Okay.
So I want to thank Gaia. I see that integral city evolution for the next century starts with a commitment to practicing the master code.
Я хочу поблагодарить Гаю. Я вижу, что наше обязательство вхождения в следующий век начинается с того, что мы практикуем мастер-код заботы.
A spectrum of strategies is needed to effectively align city development with Earth's 3 ecosystems and evolutionary strata.
Спектр эволюционных решений, которые увяжут население Земли с разными уровнями экосистем и с планетарными системами.
We have many generations of integral city capacity building ahead of us to create self-sustaining human habitats on our home planet.
Нам предстоит в течение многих поколений осваивать практику интегрального управления городами, чтобы создать по-настоящему устойчивые человеческие поселения на нашей планете.
This will require us to grow the capacities of collaboration, community, and urbanization beyond any context we have ever evolved.
Это потребует от нас развития способности к сотрудничеству, построению сообществ, выработки договоренностей, которые превосходят все ранее достигнутые масштабы кооперации и наши способности, которые мы демонстрировали в предыдущие эпохи.
And we will need to work at multiple scales simultaneously. At the city as a whole, systems, organizations, families, and individual leadership.
Нам придется научиться работать одновременно на множестве уровней. Региональные уровни, города как целое, сообщества, организации, семьи и индивидуальные лидеры.
And Gaia speaks. I want to encourage you.
Гая говорит, я хочу вас поддержать.
I can see you have already started schooling for a planet of integral cities.
Я вижу, что вы уже начали практиковать обучение как бы вот такому ведению дел в интегральных городах.
And I also see that you're recognizing a Meshworker of the year and an integral city of the year.
Я вижу, что вы уже начали смотреть, какие города являются интегральными городами года, какие сети поддерживают трансформацию городов наиболее эффективно.
You also have wise elders who are peers to support you.
У вас есть мудрые старейшины, которые готовы вас поддерживать.
One of them is Elizabeth Sahtouris, who speaks of the living systems. Just steps for creating renewal of the city that Elizabeth Sahtouris speaks of.
И одним из них является Элизабет Сатурус, которая говорит о создании путей к креативному обновлению городов.
You also have been connecting with Vandana Shiva, who talks about earth democracy.
Вандана Шива, индийский активист и мыслитель, говорит о демократии Земли.
And Dwayne Elgin, who you started out referring to, is proposing that in order to choose Earth, there are many things that we can do.
А также Дуэйн Элджин, работа которого я начала, это доклад, который предлагает множество конкретных шагов по пути выбора гармоничного развития совместно с Землей.
And so with peers like this, then it is going to be possible for you to go back to the beginning that you started at this lecture.
И с вот этими предпосылками мы сможем вернуться к началу нашей лекции, к тому вопросу, с которого мы ее начали.
And find the answers to design a city for the well-being of our granddaughters and future generations in a way that adds value to all life on Earth.
И мы сможем, применяя эти принципы, создать город, в котором будут процветать наши внуки и будущие поколения, и который будет создавать ценность для всей земли, жизни на Земле.
How do we wake up, grow up, clean up, and whole up the human hive?
Как мы можем пробудить, вырасти, очистить и сделать целостным человеческий улей, человеческое сообщество?
We can develop the curriculum for schooling a planet of integral cities 2121.
Мы можем создать новые обучающие программы, которые будут обучать нас созданию планеты интегральных городов через столетие в 21-21.
And so that brings me to the end of the lecture. I have some linkages here I can put in the chat for people. And yes, I'd like to thank you for the privilege of speaking with you today.
Это подводит меня к самому завершению лекции. В материалах, которые я вам передам, находится целый ряд ссылок на программы, конкретные статьи, которые я призываю вас ознакомиться. Я благодарю вас за возможность сегодня выступать перед вами.
And hopefully I can find my way back.
Mэрилин, thank you so much for your talk today, and it was amazing. I think we all really appreciate. I think we could have just maybe one or two questions from the audience before they will go to a conversation between themselves to analyze what you have. There was so much material, I imagine that there'll be a lot to analyze, but before we go there, I'd like to welcome people to have one or two questions. So I'm going to switch to Russian and ask them if you don't mind.
Okay, no, I'd be happy to.
Ага. Друзья, у нас уже мы как бы немножко выбиваемся за время, но мне кажется, что было бы важно все равно, если бы один-два человека, если у вас появились вопросы. Материала, мне кажется, было очень много, плотного материала, поэтому я хотел бы пригласить вас Если кто-то хочет задать какой-то сутевой вопрос на русском или на английском, выбирайте канал соответствующий. На русском тогда говорите мне, я переведу. На английском сами напрямую спрашивайте. У нас есть возможность задать 1-2 вопроса. Если кто-то, кто готов?
Павел, можно задать вопрос?
Да, давайте, Константин.
Okay, I have a question. It's maybe...
На английский переключите канал.
Это как его переключить?
Вот там
Я
у вас
на
есть...
английском слушал.
Вы на английском, хорошо.
Я слушал на английском. Mэрилин, do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
My name is Constantine, and I have a very concrete question. You mentioned at the end of your presentation that Amsterdam is an example of an integral city. And how do you judge how far, how close is Moscow to being this kind of city of the future? Thank you.
Вопрос Константина. Вот Мэрилин упомянула, что Амстердам — это пример интегрального города. Насколько Москва близка к идее интегрального города?
That's a good question. I would have to work with a group of you to help establish that. I would use the same kind of due diligence I did with Amsterdam. And I used the 12 intelligences to measure how Amsterdam was the city of the year. And they're all on my blog. So you could go have a look. And if Pavel wants to set this up, we could do it together.
Так, коллеги, я сейчас подключу. У меня нет возможности отключить звук. Выключите, пожалуйста, те, кто не говорит. Константин, в том числе вы. Спасибо большое. Ответ Мэрилин, что у нее нет точных измерений по Москве. Она будет рада посотрудничать с вами в отношении этого вопроса. И в ее блоге, который она даст ссылку, или уже есть здесь ссылка, есть, вот, собственно, там есть ссылка, в том числе на этом слайде, она указывает принципы 12 интеллектов, которые могут быть использованы для того, чтобы увидеть, насколько город целостно развивается. Но она будет очень рада, если кто-то из вас заинтересуется посотрудничать с ней по оценке состояния там конкретно Москвы или российских городов. Так, Лилия, я вижу, у вас есть рука, и давайте вот мы тогда ваш вопрос я приму сейчас, и после этого мы перейдем к уже групповой работе. Лилия, пожалуйста. Лилия?
Меня слышно?
Да. Вы на русском, на английском будете спрашивать?
На русском.
Тогда, ну ладно.
Мне хотелось бы спросить, не собирается ли докладчик сделать какую-то, ну, скажем, серию семинаров о таких вот брейнштормингов, организации вот тех вопросов, в каких городах, ну, что-то вроде такой серии мини-докладов, в каких городах что и чем это отличается, и какие есть предложения, вот просто...
Mэрилин, the question from Lilia is if you are going to create some kind of workshop series, or maybe you already have a course. I understand you do have a course that will explore these questions, because what you have told us is very rich, but it needs further elaboration.
Yes, I already have 4 courses on Ubiquity University. So they are available in English. If we wanted to translate them into Russian, then I'm very happy to talk about that.
У Мэрилин уже есть 3, даже 4 курса на Ubiquity University. Они доступны участникам на английском языке. Если кто-то заинтересуется переводом их на русский язык, найдет, сам сделает или найдет каких-то партнеров, то ей будет очень интересно это. То есть, в принципе, у нее уже есть программы, которые раскрывают эти вопросы гораздо более подробно.
And if Alexandra can access the PowerPoint, there is a slide near the end that has all of the links to it. Unfortunately, I can't do that on Zoom myself right now, but if Alexandra can put that in the chat, then other people can have an opportunity to go directly to those links, including the courses.
Alexandra,
do you want me to send the links from this slide to the chat, right?
I think it will be useful.
Yep, no problem. Just a second.
Well, Mэрилин, I think we need to wrap up because we need to move to the next stage of our work, which is a reflection on your presentation. We thank you very, very much for your very rich presentation today. It was, and I personally really appreciated the models that you have demonstrated, the model of many generations thinking, which was very valuable, and the conversation with the entity that probably drives our evolution. So these two models we will certainly take also into our expected processes with long-term horizon thinking. So thank you very much both for showing us the way and showing insights from your wisdom.
You're most welcome, Pavel. Thank you, everyone. And I really enjoy and appreciate the opportunity to connect with you in your Futures Lab. So wish you every success for the rest of it. Thank you. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое, Мэрилин. Я поблагодарил за очень интересный доклад. И также мне показалось крайне интересным, я говорю для тех, кто не понял, может быть, мои реплики на английском, что были продемонстрированы не только идеи по поводу развития городов, но и подход к тому, как можно об этом мыслить, то есть как можно мыслить поколенческими сдвигами и как можно мыслить через такой своеобразный диалог с некоторой сущностью, ну, как бы, с которой мы как бы взаимодействуем в процессе коллективной, большой коллективной эволюции, трансформации человеческой культуры. То есть вот эта модель диалога с Геей, с планетой Земля, это очень интересная, мне кажется, такая, ну, немножко игровая модель, из которой мы можем многое взять. Так что спасибо большое, Мэрилин. И я передаю слово, я попрошу тогда организаторов выключить презентацию, и передаю слово Дмитрию Брезицкому для начала групповой работы.
Всем добрый день. Мэрилин, большое спасибо. Мне было очень интересно послушать эту лекцию. Дорогие друзья, наша с вами групповая работа сегодня строится, как всегда, в гибридном принципе. Мы переходим с вами в онлайн. И первым шагом нашей работы будет заполнение в индивидуальном формате буквально за 7 минут рефлексии. То есть в индивидуальном формате мы выносим самое ценное, ровно как мы делали предыдущие 2 дня, каких основаниях исходит данный спикер. Ссылочка сейчас будет направлена в чат. Можно будет потихоньку переходить, и ссылка будет также продублирована в телеграм-канале, чтобы вам можно было работать с 2 устройств, на всякий случай. Итак, мы отвечаем на простейшие вопросы, точнее, на самом деле, ценностные и самые важные для нас вопросы. Какие предпосылки и основания лежат в основе высказываний лектора? И прошу вас указать 3-4 главных тезиса. А также мы делаем 3 типа выводов. Собственно, значимые идеи и утверждения, с которыми мы согласны, в которые лично вы верите, запишите, пожалуйста, самые значимые идеи также, которые вы